Welcome to Sports Central. I'm Grace Williams.
And I'm Yael Echeverria.
In recent years, many athletes have been advocating for legalized marijuana usage for medicinal purposes.
However, with many people supporting the cause, they are met with a strong opposition. Will it be wise for this substance to be legalized for college athletes? Here is Caleb Oakes with a story.
With the rising legalization of marijuana in more and more states, athletes have begun to start advocating for a change in their own prospective sports. According to a research conducted by The Exponent in 2017, 24.7% of student athletes that responded to the poll reported having used marijuana. The numbers since then have most likely risen, but is marijuana necessarily beneficial for student athletes?
That damages your lungs and is contrary to what you're trying to do as a student athlete. I mean, you need to have physically fit body, you need to be at peak performance, but if you're smoking, that's going to limit that. My parents were very big on developing your own hobbies, figuring out what you need to do to manage just anger in general. I feel like this younger generation doesn't really know how to do that. And there are a lot of methods and a lot of other people out there that can help instruct them in those areas.
Marijuana has been heavily criticized in the sports world, but how could it help regular people who may need it for their health issues?
There's limited research that it helps with anxiety, insomnia, depression. That is sort of anecdotal where people say it works for them, but I haven't seen proven research yet. And so you have to try the regular proven medications for whatever ailment you may have. But yeah, I mean, I'm willing to listen. I'm certainly open to the fact that it's a possibility that it may help something and we may not know it yet. We put a lot of things in our body that may not necessarily be good for our body. So I think that would be something that a student would really have to think about.
I'm Caleb Oakes reporting for MC Swoop.
Thanks for that wonderful insight, Caleb. The NCAA recently made changes to their marijuana testing policy.
This rule change is just one of the many recent events that are changing the landscape of college athletics.
We head to Britton Owens to hear more about the policy.
The NCAA recently made changes to their marijuana testing policy. This rule change is just one of the many recent events that is changing the landscape of college athletics. In a meeting that took place on February 22nd to the 23rd, the Committee on Competitive Sports Guards and Medical Aspects of Sports voted on a new policy that would increase the THC threshold that is required to activate a positive drug test. The committee voted to increase the THC threshold from 35 to 150 nanograms. These new changes are now in compliance with the World Anti-Doping Agency and the standards they have set in place.
What's your knowledge tell you about college athletes smoking and participating in marijuana?
Yeah, for college athletes, I think it's a little bit different because they're still trying to get to that ultimate goal. You don't want to have a mishap where you're getting tested by the NCAA and they're, putting their finger on it and saying you're suspended.
In addition to making changes to the actual THC threshold, the committee also proposed changes to the penalty structure for an athlete who tests positive for marijuana.
The NCAA relaxing its marijuana policies, recommending lighter punishments for athletes who test positive. Right now, one failed marijuana test means a half-year suspension, but under the new recommendations, no punishment or loss of eligibility for that first positive test. No punishment for a second positive test if that athlete is compliant with a drug abuse management plan. If not, that athlete would miss 25% of his or her games, sidelined from 50% of games upon a third positive test.
That is a look at one of the rule changes that is changing the way that college athletics will look forever. For Sports Central, I'm Britton Owens.
Thanks, Britton. Rugby can be a dangerous sport where players can be easily injured.
Let's head to Mark Pickelheimer to hear more about rugby and the concussion you can develop.
Rugby can be a dangerous sport. The men's and women's team both have the same injuries that might happen, like fractured bones, concussions, and injuries like that.
Some of the injuries that can occur with rugby are anywhere from the head, your knees, ankles. I've seen noses, facial fractures, hands, feet, pretty much any muscle you have. So rugby is very accident prone, very injury prone. I think it's about the same level as any other physical contact sport. Personally, I've had several concussions and broken nose twice, but that's why I love it, getting in there.
I currently have a concussion right now from last weekend. We were playing in Tampa, Florida for Tropical Sevens. I had the ball and got hit back of my head. About an hour, my memory's gone. But contrary to popular belief, concussions are actually way more likely to happen in football than it is in rugby. Because in rugby, you tackle a certain way, it's a lot safer. You have to wrap when you go down. And there's certain ways of tackling that's illegal, like a high tackle. You're not allowed to tackle anywhere above here on the shoulders. You can get a red card from that, which will eject you from the game. You also can't shoulder charge people. So if you tackle someone, you have to wrap them and go down with them. I've seen a lot of injuries happen on and off the field.
Thanks, Mark. Whether retirement is chosen or forced by an injury, athletes all feel some type of emptiness after being finished with such a big part of their lives.
This story gives firsthand accounts of athletes and their feelings about retiring from their sport. Here's Grace Williams.
It is a known fact that most athletes live for their sport. However, a lot of athletes will retire and have no idea how to fill the hole left by their sport and become depressed. The shocking fact is that 16% of athletes in their sport are also becoming depressed from injury. So how do athletes still playing and retired think back on how injuries have affected their mental state and how it has or will affect them after retirement?
So I've been injured for many years. I never really got my full athletic college experience because I had so many setbacks, and with those setbacks I always want to come back harder and stronger the next year, but every time there will always be a situation and a problem, and it just let me down. And I remember just being so depressed, so alone, and feeling so apathetic that I just didn't want to do this anymore. But I remember God is always with me, and that I trust him, and that his plans are greater than what I'm going through right now. So every time I would just get back up and keep training. But even with the training, like even right now this year, I'm going through the same battle. I'm still hurt a little bit, but I'm learning to understand that God doesn't care about your comfort. He cares more about your character in the situation, in the season. I know after track and after this whole athletic experience, it's not just building me in the track and field, but it's building me in life in general. So I'm honestly grateful for this experience.
When an athlete goes through an injury, it can completely change their mindset and feelings toward the game. But almost everyone learns something from the experience. It's just all about interpretation.
So my injury was actually non-contact. So I was coming down the court and I was trying to do a move and I stepped too hard to the right. After that, I heard a pop in my knee. I fell to the ground. And then the trainer told me that I most likely tore my ACL. I chose not to believe him. And when I got the MRI results, I was devastated because basketball was my entire life and I didn't know what to do after that. I was just so scared to re-injure my ACL that I just wasn't the same. The injury definitely taught me the most I've ever learned in my life, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
This is Grace Williams for Sports Central.
Thanks, Grace. Next is a segment on how the USA Olympic gymnastics team went through sexual assault and the process to overcome them.
This is truly one of the biggest scandals in the USA Olympic history. Here's my Cherie Onozurike with the story.
Now, USA Gymnastics has ended a 5-year legal dispute with survivors of the Larry Nassar sexual abuse scandal after agreeing to a $380 million settlement. The fight for justice, though, isn't over, with lawyers indicating that they would continue to push for action against officials who failed to investigate the abuse over the years. Former team doctor Larry Nassar was accused by over 300 women.
300 women, and this included some of the well-known Olympians such as Simone Biles, Ellie Hansman, and Gabby Douglas.
Yeah, I watched the Netflix series on the U.S. gymnastics team not too long ago, and I just was appalled about, everything that the girls experienced, and just to hear that those coaches and those athletic trainers that are supposed to have their best interest at health, they took advantage of those girls, and it's honestly just devastating and heartbreaking to hear.
Be clear.
Sorry. Take your time.
To be clear, I blame Larry Nassar, and I also blame an entire system that enabled and perpetrated his abuse.
Okay, after hearing everything about the gymnastics scandal, it honestly, to me personally, it made me feel very upset. Just for being a woman inside of sports today, it just makes me kind of feel uneasy about how male coaches can think they can just take advantage of their female athletes. I think that they should be looking out for them to be better as athletics and not be looking at them in that way to begin with. And I think it just makes girls in collegiate, professional, and even younger kids inside the sports just a little uneasy about everything. And I want them to feel safe. And right now, with everything going on, it makes me feel unsafe, and that's not cool when it comes to that.
What Larry Nassar did has put a permanent damage on many female athletes, especially in gymnastics. This is hard because many people look up to these ladies, and he just kind of ruined their reputation. Many female athletes in today's society are probably now worried about being in different sports and activities because of this scandal.
Larry Nassar is now serving a lifetime in prison. The survivors are now having a $380 million settlement because of the things that happened. What's next for the Olympics? What's next for the USA women in sports? We'll see. Thank you. I'm Sherry reporting for Smooth Central.
Thanks, Sherry.
That was an impactful story for them to tell.
I was really happy to see those women overcome their situation.
Hopefully more women have also the strength after looking into what they went through.
Yes.
Moving on, being a first-generation student athlete is a notable accomplishment, but with it can come a lot of expectations. Here's Taylor Hensel with his story.
Being a college athlete is already a notable accomplishment. Achieving high academics in the classroom whilst achieving high athletics on the court, field, or track takes a considerable amount of dedication.
Oh, what a dunk.
But what is even more impressive is being the first in one's family to do it. However, with it can come a lot of struggles. For example, first-generation students have bigger financial concerns than their peers. Whereas 55% of first-generation students are concerned that high tuition costs will keep them from accomplishing their bachelor's degree, only 36% of other student athletes feel the same way. Additionally, how these student athletes finance their education differs from their non-first-generation peers. Of first-generation college student athletes, 55% would not have attended college if it wasn't for their athletic scholarships. Not only do these financial burdens come with being a first generation, but with it a lot of negative emotions and expectations that one feels like they need to achieve.
Yeah, so as a first-generation athlete, I guess there's a lot of pressure from my parents, especially just because they expect a lot from me, and sometimes it's kind of like hard to accomplish those expectations, especially trying to be a role model to my little brother who also plays sports. I think mentally sometimes he's overwhelmed just because I want him to look up to me.
There were definitely a lot of challenges that went along with being a first-generation college student and an athlete. My parents weren't really sure what to do to get in contact with coaches, so that was a territory that I could kind of explore myself. And then financially as well, looking for a school was difficult because I had to ensure that I wasn't putting a more financial burden on my parents. So there's definitely a lot of pressure in that aspect. And then being an older sister, of course, too, I'm kind of like set a good example for my little sister and my brother. Yeah, it's really hard on my mental health sometimes. Sometimes I struggle with like not feeling adequate for sure.
I'm Taylor Hansel, reporting for Sports Central.
Thanks, Taylor.
There is an ongoing debate about whether participation trophies should be awarded to children.
The biggest argument is that the competition and motivation in sports is dead. Here is Faith Ray with a story.
One of the biggest arguments against participation trophies is that it kills children's sense of competition.
A consequence of participation trophies is that they can lead to laziness and dependency. Children who are used to receiving participation trophies can lack independence and need help from others to succeed. Awarding a participation trophy can actually do more harm than good. We think that providing an external reward for hard work will build motivation, but the opposite may be the case.
I want kids to improve, and I want kids to be engaged in the process of improving.
And if they get a trophy, they won't want to improve?
Why would they?
Growing up playing sports and as a travel softball coach, I know the negative effects that participation trophies can have on children. It ruins motivation. Not everyone should feel like they're first or a winner all the time. Losing is an opportunity for growth that children can use to work harder to win the next time.
We are actually implying to kids that they will get praise whether they win or lose. If the trophy or medal is not earned, then why do we give it? Participation awards make them never experience hardship and do not increase their confidence. It actually erodes it. Pretending they won when they lost does not make them feel special and denies the true winner their due. Trophies for all convey an inaccurate and potentially dangerous life message to children that we are all winners. We don't have to stop congratulating the runner-up or third place, but let's stop giving medals and trophies as tokens for their subpar work. My name is Faith Ray, reporting from Sports Central.
Thanks, Faith. Having transgender people in sports has become very controversial over the last few years.
Some people end up having unfair advantages over others. Here is Rihanna Elrod with more of the story.
Transgender people are being allowed to play sports as the gender they transition to. This often causes unfair advantages to occur. I spoke with Matt Hofstetter to get his opinion on this issue.
I have seen this issue talked about a lot recently, honestly. I think it's been in the news a lot lately. You can take Leah Thomas as an example, the transgender athlete who, she competed in female sports, she was a man and identifies as a woman now. And she has testosterone, she has still that male biology a part of her, and, where she was a low tier athlete in the men's division, now she dominates the female division. I feel like that's unfair to a lot of female athletes. I think a conversation definitely needs to be talked about, like what to do with transgender women or transgender men competing in each other's sports. I think you see it across all sports recently. I gave the example of Leah Thomas in swimming. I think you see it a lot in swimming and a lot in like track and field type events. And powerlifting especially, I've seen a lot where just because of male biologies, like the testosterone and stuff, and how big the strength difference is, how much more they can come into the female division and outlift everyone, where if they were in the male division, wouldn't do great at all. I've seen people like Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder even talk about maybe making a separate division for them, or just competing in what their biology dictates. There's a compromise somewhere, but at the same time, I think a lot of people have problems with, gaining an unfair advantage just because, they may identify as a woman, but they have the biology of a man. Someone's going to be unhappy. Like, my thought is no one should have an advantage over the other. I don't want to see the issue of, certain athletes, they become transgender just to compete in other sports and to dominate a different division just because they have a natural advantage over others. Because I think that's unfair, but I'm sure there's an answer.
Thanks, Rihanna.
With the recent controversy over Leah Thomas winning the NCAA Female Swimmer Championship, there are many people in question.
There can be an unfair advantage a transgender male can have over female athletes when competing in the same category. Here's Aksa Fars with a story.
With the recent controversy on Leah Thomas winning the women's 500-yard freestyle swimming event at the NCAA Championship, it has brought to light the issue of transgender male athletes competing in women's sports.
Men's and women's sports are vastly different in the way they're played and like the speed. And changing over into a different sport and a different gender group of sports is kind of just playing the system. When you boil it down, it's kind of basically taking advantage of the culture of today and bending it to your ability to win. There's a large difference in just how we're shaped and how we function. So men competing in women's sports is like you're already at an advantage if you're a male. You're taller, you're faster, most of the time you're stronger. You have all these advantages compared to women's sports. That's why they separated men's and women's sports, because of those advantage gaps.
Despite identifying as a woman, a male athlete still has considerable physical advantages over a woman, being taller, faster, and having larger wingspans, causing unfairness for women in female categories.
So I definitely think that there needs to be some revaluation when it comes to, them being in sports. Not to say that they're not athletes, but maybe there could be another way. But unfortunately, that just is the case where, they have an advantage, they can't get away.
Many NCAA swimmers are calling for a change in the rules on transgender males competing in female categories. Most of them are requesting a ban on the rule. The NCAA announced that they will not make any major changes until after the season is over. I'm Isaac Farsh, reporting for Sports Central.
Thanks, Isaac.
Officiating in sports has changed over time, and there seemed to be a power grab recently by referees to expand their impact on the game. Here's Leighton Story with the report.
Referees have made some questionable calls, and that has caused some to question the integrity of their...
Oh no, absolutely not. I'm sorry. First of all, his momentum is taking him with him. He has to swing back. You cannot give this young man...
So, they do a good job of following the rules for the most part, but the rules can be inconsistent at times. So like, the rules themselves, like, well, for the most part, they're clear. Pass interference is not clear at all, and that's led to a lot of inconsistency. But even with like holding calls, there's been a lot of inconsistency with NFL reffing.
So I don't think that any bad calls or missed calls are intentional and are the referees trying to sway the game. With that being said, referees are human and humans make mistakes, so I think there needs to be more of an accountability system in the referee system, to which where when a ref makes a mistake, that it doesn't alter the game in a way that can't be reversed.
Some fans call for some potential changes to be made in order to increase the efficiency of officiating.
When they make a mistake, whether that be by having to explain their calls after the game or by having review systems of their calls, whatever that would look like, but refs need to have more. There needs to be more accountability for referees.
This is Leighton Story, reporting for Sports Central.
Thanks, Leighton. There must be communication in every setting, especially in a team setting.
This can be an opportunity for athletes and coaches to provide information about how their teams communicate, tips, and how they might have a lack of communication. Here's Yael Echeverria with the story.
Communication can be the key to success, especially when it comes to a team setting. It is not only important for student athletes to communicate to each other, but also how the coach makes that happen. Let's see what some of the student athletes think, what communication is, and how important it is on and off the court.
Good communication within a team would be having communication on and off the field, so you can be a great team, on the field, skill-wise. You can have all the players that have every single asset you might need, but if you're lacking that communication between each other off the field or the court or whatever it is you play, I think you're severely going to be lacking it on the field as well. Communication is very important, and if you don't have it, it can cost you the game.
Understanding how each different person needs to be approached. In my experience, I've had teammates where I need to sugarcoat a little bit what I'm gonna say to get my point across. That doesn't mean that they're like sensitive or anything like that. It's just like the way they communicate better. And some other teammates, if you do that, they will feel disrespected. So like understanding how each person prefers to be addressed, and honestly just having the proactivism of voicing what needs to be voiced, and that goes verbally and non-verbally as well.
People use the word communication like holistically, but there's several variables to it. So it could be, I need to work on listening, or I need to work on being able to repeat what I just heard, or I need to work on saying what needs to be said in as few words as possible. So there's various elements and facets to communication. Learning the people that you work with, learning the people that you play with, learning how they interpret your communication, always following up. Like also if someone's talking to you, say for instance, you're listening intently, and then when the opportunity presents itself, you can say something to the effect of, okay, let me tell you what I heard you say, and repeat it back. So just, incorporating the same techniques that you would use with your team in the workforce, because they are interchangeable.
Reporting for Sports Central, this is Yael Echeverria.
Thanks, Yael. You have just heard the latest sport news. Thank you for being with us today. I'm Grace Williams.
And I'm Yael Echeverria. Be sure to tune into the next broadcast of Sports Central. Have a wonderful day.